I'm delighted to say we're live with another episode of Being Human, and I'm here with Katherine Woodward Thomas. She is a New York Times best-selling author. She's written 3 books, What's True About You, which I'm hoping we're going to take a dive into today. She's also written Calling in the One, most famous bestseller, and Conscious Uncoupling. Say that 10 times.
Conscious Uncoupling.
Conscious Uncoupling.
Yeah,
which many of you may have heard of through the Gwyneth Paltrow connection. That's certainly how I'd heard of that term. And now, of course, we're here to talk to the author of that book, amongst 2 others. So, Katherine, a huge, warm welcome to Being Human.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Okay, as with most of my guests, I love to start with a little bit about your background, who you are, a little bit about little Katherine. Yeah.
Okay.
Tell us something of your, growing up.
Well, sure. I mean, look, all the wisdom that one might hope to pour into a book comes from somewhere, comes from having lived through something. And luckily, I had a very traumatic childhood, so I had a lot to work with. And a lot of relational trauma. Mother, very, very young, back in the 50s, got pregnant and had to get married. And that was the beginning of kind of a revolving door of husbands and family structures and moving every year and losing track of my grandmother and my father. And so a lot of relational upheaval, and also feeling that my mother was, she was putting herself through college while she had me as an infant. So a lot of neglect, or a lot of different caregivers. So, all of that kind of, is really good food for dysfunction. As you're growing up in life, I developed an eating disorder, came from a lineage of alcoholics, and, just was, but also was dedicated to having a good life. I was a creative kid, an artist. I always loved people, always wanted to contribute, always wanted to participate in things. So I had a hunger for life, thank goodness. And I had a love for people that seemed to be organic to who I was. So finding my way in the world was something that I really kind of decided when I was very young. I have to make something of my life. I have to contribute. I had some drive in me to do that. So I think that was the background of how I was kind of formed in my personality, with a lot of dysfunction. But what really drove me to do my own initial healing work was that I developed this eating disorder. So I was kind of non-functional in the world, but I didn't have relationships that were fulfilling. My heart kept getting broken. I kept I kept trying to stabilize my life in some way so that I could contribute. And luckily, I stayed on the education bandwagon somehow. I didn't get too derailed from that, which kept me, on a certain track to be able to do what I now do. But I really struggled with a lot of heartbreak and what I call a fragile sense of self. Like a very fragile sense, like I'm really inferior, or I'm not good enough, or I'm all alone in this world. I've come to call those terms our core source fracture stories. Those are like the original break in our heart that we kind of default back into whenever it's a disappointment or an obstacle or pushback. We go, see, it kind of collapse into that, see, I'll always be alone, or I'll never make anything of my life, or whatever that default is. And that's really what I call the inner glass ceiling on our potential, right? Because if we're centered emotionally in that story, there is a tendency then to show up in ways that are covertly designed to enroll other people into that narrative. So we have relational evidence continually. This is why it's very hard to stay in possibility, right? Where this is where we get designed. Will I ever have the breakthrough? Will I ever be successful? Will I ever have do I ever get to graduate from the imprinting of my painful past? That's where we go into the resignation, is not because of what happened maybe, 30, 40 years ago, but what just happened 30, 40 minutes ago with the person we were dating and had hope for it, and then they just ghosted us or didn't respond or
Mm.
whatever. So So one of the things in the book that I'm unpacking in What's True About You, and that is my latest book that just came out. I'm very excited about it, all lit up with those teachings, is the ability to begin to differentiate between a trauma narrative that we're centered in, that we're assuming is true because most of us tend to, believe what we feel. And so we're kind of captivated by the emotions associated with that, the shame, the embarrassment, the humiliation, the desire to hide ourselves, or whatever that emotion is, feelings of being alone. Um, so we get captivated by that. We start relating to that narrative as though it's true, or what is really true, and learning how to mentor ourselves from part of ourselves that has development, that does see from a broader perspective, that can hold complexity. No, sweetheart, it's not that you'll always be alone, but it might be that this person is not available. Right.
Yeah.
So, that's the
Yeah.
behavioral therapy where you're questioning your own assumptions. So, to wake ourselves up to a deeper truth so that we can actually navigate life and love in our relationships from the part of us that's holding wisdom and strength and has agency and can stay generative of a positive possible future, even in the face of a setback, and even use setbacks to grow as
Yeah.
opposed to kind of collapse.
Great. Thank you. Um, Wonderful. Yeah, to be to hear your story, and you've sort of set the table for what we're going to explore.
Well,
So
and just to say, I was in therapy for years, in and out, looking back, analyzing the past. One of my things, and I am a psychotherapist, and one of my things is, hey, yes, do that work. It's critical work. It's important work. It's holy work. It's sacred work. And be mindful that you don't want to, what we put our attention on grows, and you don't want to just be about the impaired self of the past that you developed in response to trauma. The
yeah,
internal, not good enough, or I'm alone.
yeah, and I really appreciate this, and it's interesting. I feel like we've already got to kind of the rub, and what I was so curious about, having read part of the book and understand more about your work, is this relationship between doing the grief work, the deep feeling work, which, as I was sharing to you before we came on, I've done an awful lot of, and the future facing work, the possibility oriented work, and yeah, because my experience, I'll just lay this out before I ask the question. My experience of doing that deep feeling work was, if I did go into the pain, to the old pain, relived those moments, gave myself agency in those moments in a way that I didn't have then, allowed myself to get to the tears, allowed myself to punch the cushions and just and collapse, collapse into all the feelings that were present to me
Mhm.
from that earlier scene or circumstance. I found resolution. It
Mhm.
wasn't like it grew. It it actually, the opposite happened. Event that I used to relate to as painful, and one in which I was a victim, and it was important I claimed my victimhood first,
Mhm.
dissolved. Like so like in that scenario, I put my attention on it, and
Mhm.
with sufficient attention, it actually dissolved, and it was curative, right? And it was like, there are certain scenes from my childhood now that I can picture in my head, and there's zero charge. Like, I can see this thing happened, and this thing happened to Richard, and there's nothing left in the tank associated with those events. So I'm curious about when does that, like, not happen? When can it be that we
Yeah.
do get sort of stuck spinning our wheels around a past event?
So let me just give you a little background
Mm,
that I find very important in this conversation. Back in 1986, there were two academics who did a paper that they called possible selves. That was the
mm,
paper. And what they were proving in that academic research was that the future we're living into has as much sway over our present, our motivation, our actions, our choices as the past does. So one of the things that we're missing in our healing conversation is what's the
Mm.
future you're committed to creating? What is your soul coded for? The restlessness that we feel, where you almost feel like you have a parallel life, like, I think I'm supposed to have a lot of money, or I should have more success by now, or I thought I was going to be a parent by now, or whatever that phantom is. Like, you feel that something is within your realm, within your reach, but it's not manifesting. It's not coming on board. One of the reasons that is happening is because we are not yet who we would need to be in order to manifest that and then sustain it over time. I call it missing development.
Yeah.
In other words, let me give an example. Let's say you grew up with a narcissistic parent, very painful. So you have what's called, psychologists call it a developmental trauma, because over time, you never got to form a sense of yourself. You never got to learn how to interact with two-ness. And as a matter of fact, you learned how to disappear your feelings and your needs in order to stay bonded with that person and to make sure that they don't leave you. So what you're missing is the ability to, number one, know what you're feeling, because it was never cultivated, right? You don't even
Yeah.
know what you feel. You know what the other person feels, maybe, because you got really good at being invisible, but as an adaptive strategy. But you don't know what you feel. You don't know what you need. You certainly don't know how to negotiate your needs with somebody. And you have a habit of sourcing safety from your own invisibility. So you're going to have a habit of putting your first attention on others. That missing development, without that, you can't actually evolve beyond the pattern of getting involved with narcissistic people or being drawn to them again.
Okay. Yeah.
You get stuck there. So where I'm talking to mostly are people who are doing their inner work to put in the future that you're committed to creating, vibrant, happy relationships that are mutual, that are founded upon respect, with two people who have the capacity to love another human being.
Mm.
That's the future we're going toward. Once you claim that future, what you do is you initiate growth in the direction of that dream. So one of the things that we like to say in therapy, we have these little platitudes that somehow we all kind of collectively settle on. Oh, we're repeating old patterns because we're just trying to heal. But
Yeah.
I never repeated an old pattern and felt like that was a healing experience. I always felt that was a re-wounding, a very unfair experience where my imprinting caught up with me again. And I feel kind of victimized by my own imprinting. Then I go back to, why did this happen? Now I'm victimized by what my mother did 50 years ago. It's like a little loop that kind of seduces me back into more analysis. Well, it's important to know why you are the way you are and to be able to do that. And the fact that your therapy was so effective is really impressive to me. I think there are statistics that, that maybe 30, 40% of people have a similar experience to what you had. Some of us get stuck, though, in that birth canal. We never quite get to the other side. So the book is about how do you manifest a great life? How do you graduate from the imprinting so that it becomes a story of how I used to be, but it has nothing to do with who I am now or how my life shows up?
Yeah. And I can, and that's wonderful. I suppose what I'm curious about is, if I were somebody who, and I'm not claiming I'm by no means cured, but let's say a significant portion of my blueprint, my imprinting, should I say,
Yeah.
I'll use the term dissolve. I did the grief work, and those events, those circumstances, and the cluster of beliefs around them and everything got got absolved. Right? It's just, I went deep enough, long enough, that the charge is gone. And so for me, there's nothing to transcend, right? There's nothing there's just nothing there. But I could quite understand, it might, and just from my perspective, where there may be elements which aren't fully healed and there is unresolved pain back there. And from what you're saying, is it now that I kind of have a choice? I could go and do the work there, or I could kind of choose to leave it there and orient myself from possibility.
Well, I
Is
don't
that
ever
what we're
leave it there. Thank you for asking that. I don't ever leave it there. Parts work that Dick Schwartz has
saying?
popularized in his IFS model began with a woman named Virginia Satir. I always like to mention the women because a lot of times the women their names disappear from the story. But she actually was the one who is considered like the mother of family therapy, and she used to have things called parts party. But all these parts of ourselves that are holding various narratives, it's which self are we identified with? But I don't just drop the self. If I discover that, I have a 4-year-old and that 4-year-old feels bereft, that I'll collapse into if I get rejected, right? And she gets bereft because she thinks everyone's going to always reject her. I can now have access to her and say, sweetheart, what are you assuming is true? Right, sweetheart, what are you feeling right now? Let me tell you what's really true about this. Right. So there's this relationship with the self that we want to develop because we're all adults now and we're not responsible for what happened to us as children, but we're responsible for who we're being now. And in many ways, when we feel like that rejection sensitivity or whatever, we'll collapse into that and we stop mentoring ourselves to a deeper truth and asking ourselves what else might be true? What might be more true? And waking ourselves up. So let me give you the context, Richard, that the book is written in. So right now, collectively, we are in a dire state, particularly here in America. So I have that skewed. I live in California, and what's happening in America is very obviously dark and scary for a lot of people. And we feel that we're at very precarious times. And what's happening is people are kind of resigning to there is no positive future. There's only a negative future. We're living into climate change. How are we going to feed 10 billion people on the planet? Like all of these very severe things that are coming up that we don't seem to be addressing in a way that a lot of us want it addressed. So to be able to learn the technology of how do I stay generative of a positive possible future? How do I remind myself that there is no fixed future? How do I remember that I have influence? I have agency to be able to create something that doesn't yet exist, to take a stand for something. This goes back to, we were talking about the landmark work, right? Like
Yeah.
all the, stuff that Werner Erhard was bringing forth in the 60s and 70s and stuff, that we can make a difference, that we are powerful, that we have agency. So I think people are collapsing into insignificance and powerlessness in the face of these multiple problems. The book is timely for me, particularly for our young people who are really suffering. Young people are, really impacted by what's happening. They don't feel hope for the future. So I'm bringing forth a book that says, look, there is no fixed future. And wherever we're centered at the level of identity is going to determine how we're showing up and facing this. So how do we stay out of reactivity, which is only going to generate more of the same, and get into being the creators of the lives we desire, of the world we desire, of the future we desire?
I absolutely love all of that. And you're quite right that our identity, who we say we are at a core level, shapes everything.
Everything.
If I'm coming from, I'm powerful, I'm generous, I'm loving, I'm connected. Like my life looks one way, and if I come from, I'm not good enough, I'm wrong, I'm alone, etc., etc., which you have in the second half of your book, right? All of that you do these dives into. I have a different world that I'm living into and that I'm creating around me. Like I adhere all to that, and I'm left with the question from this therapy, because it's fascinating to have you on. because I have therapists on and I have coaches on. And I deal every day with my clients as a coach who's also well versed in all these therapeutic techniques. I'm always asking myself the question, where do I go with the client in this moment? Do I work with them at a grief level and do the therapeutic work? Is that what required of me at this moment, and help this person to heal and to collapse into their victimhood? Because actually there's some healing to be done, and it's sometimes there is great value. And this is what I found, to simply collapse into the feelings and let myself be in that as a expression of grief, and as part of a process of grieving and healing. Or or do I do the part style work where I'm okay, where could you source you from now, and how could you be orienting yourself differently like that? And I go with my intuition each time, but I'm fascinated to have you here now, and to potentially offer some guidance about, when's the time for healing and feeling, and when's the time for sourcing from a higher place?
Yeah, well, it's one of the questions that I know a lot of the future forward therapists that I'm training now really have to address. So I think what you're sharing is important for all practitioners. Where do I go with this conversation? The default does tend to be we all are collectively very sophisticated now in explaining our history and why we are the way that we are. What I'm interested in is what's going to give me access to the power to actually transform it.
Mm,
That's where my area of interest is. So
yes.
I can, I'm listening to your experience, which is gorgeous because you can actually neutralize charges, which means you're not in reactivity or disappearing a lot of your own, old default interpretive lenses, and therefore deactivating reactivity, which is really
Yeah,
where,
absolutely. Whenever I do that healing work, I come out less reactive,
yeah,
less triggered. My
and that's,
life.
yeah, so that's it. That's it right there. We're looking to de-escalate reactivity. We're all on the same side of the team here, but I think it has to do with um, how far along someone is, how strong they feel in their own ability to what we call shift centers. Can you access
Mm,
a self that's not damaged? Can you access the self that is strong, that is wise, that is whole inside yourself? So we have to be mindful of where the client is in any given moment and what they can tolerate. One of the ways that I assess that as a clinician is I look at how adept am I at being able to take responsibility for myself as the source of my experience.
right.
Okay, that's it right there. Okay, so some people are very tender and they don't have a big muscle there yet. So if you say,
Mm,
if your pattern is abusive, people are coming into your life, they're taking advantage of you. In conscious uncoupling, I came up with a phrase that said 97% the other person. Yes, victimized. Okay. What's your 3%? What's your 3%?
mm,
Because 3% is where the gold is for you. Because
yeah.
there's some way that you're enrolling them into a lesser version of yourself. There's some way you're underpresenting, you're not setting boundaries, you're not speaking up, you're not negotiating your needs. That's where the gold for growth is. So I tend to err on the side of development. Like, what's the missing development? What didn't you learn in your childhood home that's now handicapping you from being able to go forward and create the life and the love that you desire? And I name that. So, for example, let me give you another very simple, relatable example. A lot of us, I think probably the most common is I'm not good enough, but then the second most common might be I'm alone,
Yeah.
particularly in America where you have, rugged independence is one of our ideals. So you have this I'm alone, and in the I'm alone, there's a relational belief. So every belief is relational. We tend to think like we've named our I'm alone. I think I'm alone in the world. What's the relational aspect? What does that mean? It means what are you projecting onto others? Others are going to leave me, or no one's going to be there for me. One of the two, most likely. So inside of others are going to leave me, there's an anxiety if any conflict arises. Because a person who is emotionally centered in I'm alone, relationships are fragile and people do leave. So there's an avoidance of conflict. But what studies have shown, I mean, John Gottman and his wife years ago did research that what actually really bonds people is conflict. And if you don't engage conflict, it never really roots down the relationship. So then you're having superficial relationships that are inauthentic, where number one, you're self-abandoning and leaving yourself alone because your first attention is over here, desperately trying to have somebody be pleased with you so that they don't leave. Because if you have a severe kind of codependence, I'm alone story, what you're doing is you're tender even if somebody is displeased with what you're saying, they disagree with what you're saying. That could feel threatening. So you almost need this seamless togetherness to feel secure. So you kind of throw yourself under the bus, you self-abandon, you lose touch with your own emotions and needs, and then you're people pleasing, which means that there's really only one of you in the room. So that's the perfect match for the narcissistic personality, right? So how do we grow beyond that habit? Because we're constantly enrolling people into our story. So beliefs are relational. You might want to think about having Dan Siegel if you can get him, because he's really doing a lot of research in this area. A lot of us tend to think that beliefs are just kind of, I have my belief, I'm not good enough, or I'm not safe, but we don't see it contextually. So beliefs were formed in relationship with someone. Something was happening. We didn't just pluck it out of the ethers. Something was happening in the relational field. Somebody was misbehaving. Somebody was being negligent. Somebody was being, dysfunctional or whatever. And that got interpreted at a younger age by us as who I am. That became about me, because that's our task, is to form a sense of self and to see where we fit into this world and who we are for others. So we're forming a sense of self based on their pathology or their inadequacies or their woundedness. And then we're kind of, sinking into all sorts of safety strategies to survive that. Now, if we take those safety strategies into our adulthood, that becomes dangerous. That becomes why we don't actualize our potentials. So what I'm essentially doing, I mean, I train coaches and I train psychotherapists, and I'm essentially bridging the two worlds, because traditionally therapy's been about the past and, their coaching's been about the future. But I think we need both. And going back to that 1986 article, by the way, the reason why that never got out into pop culture was because academics back then didn't interact with pop culture psychology. Back then in 1986, the big thing was Codependent No More, Melanie Beattie. And she's not an academic. She didn't even go to college, Melanie Beattie. She wasn't a therapist.
I remember her books. They were awesome.
They were wonderful. And they introduced this whole thing. We all kind of got on that bandwagon because she was talking from her subjective experience. She figured something out, and that was in the pop world. So there was a split, and it's not like, now we have Dan Gilbert or we have Brene Brown or these wonderful academics who've done all this research, and they're writing the pop books. So there's an integration, but it didn't happen back then. So that article kind of came and went, and it just went by the wayside. I think, wow, if that article had gotten picked up, how different therapy might be right now, because we'd probably be including the future. Like, where are we going?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I think I must have lucked out to some extent with my therapy, because that was always part of my therapy. It was always like, we're doing this healing work in service of something.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want your life to be?
Yeah, there you go.
But what I'm getting through clearly, which is something that perhaps wasn't so much emphasized in my therapeutic journey, was the idea of the development gap. For me, the orientation was very much about grieving the unmet need. And like I say, that was absolutely transformative for me. And you talk about, it's interesting, you pick up on conflicts. I lost my first relationship. We never had a fight until we never have a fight for 5 years. And then one day it was over. But it was because I wasn't in touch with my feelings. So I couldn't. There was nothing. There was no material to fight over. I never let myself get angry. I never let myself get sad. I stayed right down the middle all the way.
No.
And so there was never a conflict. I'm now in a relationship which is far more stable, paradoxically, because we do fight from time to time.
Yeah.
And that's because I allow my feelings to come up and I express them.
Well, that's how you learn, the contours of each other. That's how true love can actually develop.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
exactly. But
mm.
this idea of focusing on the missing, development, I like, and that's something that's different.
Yeah. I like Joe Dispenza's statement, break the habit of being yourself.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
these habits, the habit of underpresenting, the habit of overfunctioning. So in different false centers, and you alluded to the second part of the book, which lists 22 of the source fracture stories that are most common and how we are generating evidence for them and how we're relating to ourselves, others, and life. So, for example, inside the I'm not good enough, we might have ways of relating that occur now for us just as our personality, which is that we overfunction, we overgive, we overdo, because we're trying to prove to others that we are good enough. But of course, what we're doing is we're demonstrating that our time is less valuable, our energy is less valuable than they are. We're kind of being subservient in some way to them. And then they start to feel entitled to it. And then they give us feedback if we're not keeping up our share, our overburdened share, because they come to expect it. And then we get relational mirroring that we're not up to par. So that's how we're generating it and keeping the story alive. That's what I'm wanting people to really start to see from a more mature lens. I think we're underdeveloped in these two places. What am I projecting onto other people? What am I assuming
Yeah.
is true?
Yeah.
Other people are, for the I'm not good enough, is other people are better than me.
Yeah.
Other people are better than me. Or even with life, I have to do twice as much for half the reward. That's part of the
Mm.
I'm good enough too. So, or you have I'm not safe, other people have ill intent, or other people are going to take something from me. That's the love avoidant pattern in intimate relationships. I want love, but they're going to suck me dry here. That's the assumption there. And how do you, so then the question becomes, well, first of all, you start with a commitment to have a healthy relationship. So how would I have a relationship that actually nurtures me as opposed to sucks me dry? Like that's a good question to live into, right? Like what
Yeah.
would that look like?
Yeah.
And then who would I be being? What's the missing skills? Well, I'm not negotiating my needs. Probably I'm not setting good boundaries. Probably I'm not pacing the relationship properly. I'm getting all entangled with somebody too quickly before I know their character or their capacity or availability to love me in a way I need to be loved. Right. So we're looking at, and I've broken it down. This is how you are showing up. It's generating more evidence. And this is the new way that you'd be showing up that would actually create a different experience in this area. And the big light bulb moment for of that is, oh, it's not like who I essentially am. Like God made the mountains, God made the sun, and God made Catherine to be all alone in this world. It's that it's some way that it's something I'm doing. It's something that I'm bringing into the relationship and I'm actually the source of it. It always occurs like it's outside me, like it's the other person. If I have an I'm not safe story and I'm getting to know somebody, maybe I'm negotiating a business deal with them or something, and I'm trying to, get to know them a little bit, but I'm going into the conversation pretty convinced that other people want to screw me over and I better be vigilant about this. What it creates is a lack of safety for the other person because I'm not sponsoring their good intent. I'm not seeing things in a balanced way. I'm seeing things skewed in a negative way. And I'm kind of just projecting that onto them. They might be a very good person who cares about integrity, but I'm not listening to find out who they are. I'm bringing something into the room with me. How does that feel on the other side? Well, it feels threatening to the other person, feels unsafe for them. So then they start back forth. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I want a little more here. It brings out the worst in them. And now they're behaving in a way that I would expect them to behave.
I get
Right?
evidence for my
I'm
own.
the source of it. I think they're the source of it, but I'm the source of it. So
Yeah.
just getting into the habit, like, who am I being? What am I assuming is true? How old is that part of me that's making that assumption? What might be more true? What might be more effective? What might get us to the future that we're hoping for? Right. So there's all this kind of development that needs to happen where we need to get more sophisticated. Because when we first created the beliefs that many of us are still operating out of, we lacked any capacity for cognitive complexity. We couldn't hold the nuance of, oh, gee, my mother's depressed. She needs medication. Can we get her to the doctor? When I'm 4, I just know she's in the bedroom and she doesn't want to talk to me. So I must be worthless or not very valuable. Right.
Yeah.
Black and white story. No
Yeah.
complexity there.
And what I have to say, I love, having read the section of the book I have read, is I've been, what you presented to me was this power of choosing who I am, consciously who I am. And I'd always applied that in quite an instrumental way, in terms of, okay, I'm going into a meeting, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing that. Okay, in those scenarios,
Mhm.
it would be valuable for me to ask myself the question, who am I going to be? Or who am I being moment to
Yeah.
moment?
Even before
Okay.
you walk into the room, who am I
Yeah.
going to walk into the room? There you go.
Yeah, exactly. But you were like, no, do it when you offer your you order your Starbucks. Like, do it anyway. That was so liberating. So now I've been like
Sure,
just
that's
walking.
right. Right.
Yeah,
So this is, let me just tell the people the Starbucks story. So 30 years ago, before the internet, when I was super shy, I couldn't even look people in the eye when I was talking to them. I started to get this feeling deep down inside that I was going to be speaking to thousands of people. I didn't know where it came from. It wasn't an aspiration I had that I was conscious of. I was scared of that. I was scared of people. I didn't have the self-esteem to, as I said, just even look one person in the eye, let alone talk to thousands. But so it didn't make any sense to me. But I did know one thing. I knew that if I was going to be speaking to thousands of people, I sure as hell better become someone who had something valuable to say. That was the only thing I could latch on to. I didn't know how to make that happen, or, and I said it was pre-internet. So there's like no way that, like, how could I do that? So I started to just take on this devotion to becoming a person of wisdom, and to lean into the stronger parts of myself, to hold myself accountable to a higher standard of integrity that I'd ever held. I took myself seriously. I took that inner knowing seriously. Like, who would I need to be trustworthy with power like that? And so that became my North Star. And I also started to put it into my physicality. So every morning I would just, go to the Starbucks. I'd walk to the Starbucks, and my normal way of walking would be kind of maybe collapsed in with my shoulders a little hunched or looking down or something. Because that was kind of the I'm not good enough walk, the I'm not good enough shuffle that I would choose to back then. But how would a world leader of love and wisdom order their morning coffee? And I would, my shoulders throw back. I'd take a deep breath. I'd go way down into my body, and I would look the barista in the eye, and I would order my morning grande Americano from that place. I would just practice being the self of my future. And that's really how it started. You just take on the self of your future and you bring that self into the present, and you allow that self of the future. And that's what I mean by the article of what Hazel Marcus and Paul Inarius found in 86 is that when you are committed to a positive possible future, that future will begin to initiate development in that direction. And you want to follow that. You want to begin to lean into that and make that your North Star. Manifestation, to me, is not about getting what you want. It's about becoming who you'd need to be in order to have that and sustain it over time. That's the goal.
yeah. And your particular, and thank you for sharing that, and your particular contribution to me in that regard, just because I think there may be other listeners who find this valuable, is you can choose to be that anytime.
Yes.
It's because my practice has been, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to visualize myself on that stage or with £1,000,000 in the bank, et cetera, or in it driving the Rolls Royce or whatever it might be. And I like create special times when I do that. But I think what you've liberated me, say no, but you could choose to be that, and you could be that anywhere, walking the dog, right? Like,
Yeah, you're just waiting for the
play
world to.
with it. Like, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I love that. I found that really liberating. So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, good. I, I tell you what I'm doing. So this is a wonderful conversation, and I absolutely I love that aspect of it. And I'm still wrestling a little bit with this question of when. Okay, so I'm starting to get a sense of, like, one of the ways in which you're different in terms of the orientation is this focus on the developmental need, right? And that makes sense to me. And I'm still curious about what is the role of feeling feelings? What is the role of allowing yourself to acknowledge your victimhood and potentially reliving aspects of your past and visiting your past? Um, but where does grief have a role in all this? Like, that, if you like, that aspect of, you might say, traditional psychotherapy, or
Mhm.
that way of working with people. What's its role in this, in your worldview, let's say, in terms of personal development?
Yeah, no, it's a very important role. It's a very important role. In the second step of the 7-step process I've created, which is about naming your source fracture story.
Mm,
By the way, we have different source fracture stories in different areas of life. So the first step is to claim a positive possible future in an area where you've really struggled.
yeah.
Just keeps showing up as a struggle, like you just haven't had the breakthrough. So you claim that and you go for the gold. You don't do just in an order to intention. Like in an order to intention might be, well, I'm going to start dating nicer people because one day I hope to be married. You just go right to, I'm the happily married, partner of an amazing person who just blows my mind every day with how brilliant and beautiful they are. So, and they're the perfect match for me. So, you go right for the goal. That's the step one. So now that's what's pulling us into the future. Wayne Dyer called it activating a future pull. So I like that word, that term, future pull. But then you have to go to, well, what's the pattern that I have in this area? And where do I hold the emotions of that particular pattern? When it doesn't happen again, when I do get passed over for the promotion, when a large bill does come in the moment I finally have some money in the bank, or whatever that setback is that kind of duplicates the, Sisyphus pushing the boulder up and you go all the way back down to the beginning again. So, so what is that? And where do I feel it in my body?
Mm,
Right. And then I'm going to say to myself, I have a practice that I'll share with people now because I love this practice. And this, I think, addresses, being with your own feelings and really feeling deeply what it is, where you close your eyes and you just ask yourself at any point in the day, sweetheart, honey, what are you feeling right now? And you just name the feeling. You don't
yeah.
change it. You just be with it. Well, I feel, it might be physical. I'm tired right now, or it might be emotional. I feel kind of bereft. I feel kind of alone right now, or whatever it is. I feel really happy. I feel really excited about the day, whatever you're feeling, but you just name the one emotion and you say, I can see that you're feeling really excited. Yeah. What else are you feeling? And you sit with yourself and you just kind of be with your feelings. And then you can shift into, after maybe 6 times of that, where you're just present. You're not trying to fix or change anything. Then you go into, and what do you need?
Mm,
What do you need right now? Right now, what do you need? Oh, I need a break, or I need a vacation, or I need to get something to eat, or I need a hug, or I need words of encouragement, right? You just listen to yourself. You sit with yourself. I mean, that practice really begins to build an inner connection with your own self. And I think that the connection you have with yourself is the foundation for being able to change your life. You can't actually change your life without being connected to yourself in this way. And then we want to move into self awareness, where you might say, what are you assuming is true right now? Particularly if you're finding yourself anxious
Mm.
or a little depressed or discouraged. You want to ask yourself, what are you assuming is true right now? And it might be, that, that this is never going to work out in this area for me, or I'm assuming that I'm not good enough, or whatever it is. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how old are you, sweetheart? How
Okay.
old, how old is this part of you? Right. And now there's two of you in the space. There's the part of you that is witnessing yourself with love and compassion and just holding and containing whatever's so. And you're sorting now what's true and what's trauma. What's true, what's trauma. And you can mentor yourself. You have to learn how to mentor yourself. Let me tell you what's really true about you, sweetheart. You think you're not good enough because you don't yet know everything you need to know. But guess what? You're never going to know everything you need to know. You're always going to be a lifelong learner. And you don't have to know everything to be good at this. And, this is yours to give, and one foot in front of the other. And let's not judge it. Let's just, trust that, you have these gifts and they want to come out, and we're going to get them out. We're going to figure this out. Right. So you're speaking to yourself in a way that's encouraging, and you're sponsoring your own potential. One of the reasons that most of us have a deficit in this area is because when we were young, we didn't get sponsored in our
Mm.
potential. We were told what we were doing wrong, but we weren't told what we were doing right. We didn't necessarily, there's this question we ask, what do you want to be when you grow up, to kids? I suppose
Yeah.
that's the sponsorship of a positive future,
Yeah.
But I think to really see the giftedness in kids, to say,
Mm.
you're really good at this. You're really good at this. If we all look at our own lives and you see what just kind of comes naturally to you, you just do
Yeah.
it. You get a lot of good feedback, and it's not hard. You assume you're going to make money. You assume you're going to have friends. You assume you're going to get married because, everybody wants to marry you. Why not? And, so those areas, if you go back, you'll see in your childhood that you got a lot of good sugar on that. Wow,
Yeah.
look at that. That's beautiful art. You're good at this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Feedback. So then it built up a sense of self in that particular area,
Yeah. Yeah.
agency, and you're effective and you have power and you can. It's the areas where it's like, okay, calm down. Children need to be seen, not heard right now.
Mm.
Who do you think you are? Or slow down, Missy, or don't get too big for your britches, or, leave some for others, or, all of
Yeah.
those images where you're kind of contract.
Mm.
And that's where it gets internalized in a squirrely way that has us kind of racked with self-doubt. So learning how to sponsor ourselves is a very big, important part of this teaching. And that happens really in step 2 and step 3, where you're waking up to what's really true about you. You actually
Yeah.
are enough. You can do this. You are worthy of love and respect right now. You need do nothing to prove your value. You didn't come here to be alone. You came here to love and be loved. And you have the power to learn how to have good relationships and root love down. You are the source of your own safety. You are the source of safety in all of your relationships, for yourself and for others. To learn how to speak to ourselves in this way.
Yeah. 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 I'm just, what comes to mind, just as you're speaking, the a book I read, the drama of the gifted child,
Yeah, Alice Miller.
Alice Miller. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She emphasizes this role of the witness,
Yes. Yeah.
that person who sees you. Um,
I and
Right.
I don't want to say that the victimhood to me is always valid. I think, what some of us have been through is horrific. So when we talk about non-victimization, we're not talking about a denial that you've been victimized. We're talking about, so non-victimization as an adult. How am I responsible now as an adult for perpetuating this
Yeah.
story?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's two realms in non-victimization. And the first one is, who am I being that's allowing this? What's my 3%? right? How am I participating in this? Where am I not speaking up, or where am I speaking up too much? Or, how am I impacting the field in a way that this is occurring? That's an inquiry. The second part of non-victimization is, who will I be in the face of it? It has nothing to do with me. I didn't necessarily create this at all, but now I'm challenged by it. And who am I going to be in the face of it? Well, very often the wise choice is, I'm going to get stronger. I'm going to use this to strengthen
Yeah.
my conviction and my own power, and learn how to speak up, or whatever it is that I'm going to use it for good. But who will I be in the face of it? So and it's about protecting, not going into reactivity, but staying generative of the future. But
Yeah.
were we victimized? Oh boy, sure. Lack of wisdom, up the yin yang, selfish motives of our parents. There's this whole thing like, oh, everybody's doing the best they can. I'm like, I don't know. Is that true? Are we really? Could we do better? I don't know. Would the world be a little bit better if we all just really actually did do our very best? Like, we have these platitudes to make ourselves feel better, but I'm not sure that they're true. I like truth. The other thing is power statements that I was just listing off. I was just kind of rattling off some power statements where you're correcting your own consciousness. They have to be true. You can't go from, oh, I'm not safe, to, I am safe. Everybody likes me. No, actually they don't really. Most people are indifferent to you. Like that's what's probably really true. You know?
Yeah.
So I like truth. I like truth.
Yeah. Wake up to the true you.
True
Yeah.
you. True. What's true?
Yeah. 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 This makes sense. Yeah. And I like the fact you're emphasizing the validity of claiming victimhood, because that was a huge step for me. I
Yeah.
went from total denial about anything bad ever having happened to me ever in my childhood, and
Oh.
to my first step in gaining agency and self-responsibility was
Mm-hmm.
being a victim, which is
Mm-hmm.
so I always have a reaction to people saying about, oh, don't be in a victim narrative, you take responsibility. I'm like, no, owning your victimhood is very often an expression of self-responsibility.
Anything that happened in childhood, you're not responsible. I mean, I did have one person say it helps me to be responsible for the decisions that I made when I was a kid. And I'm like, okay, great. If you can hold that, that's great. Right. So, we did come to conclusions that then we've been living out of, that have been limiting our lives. So it's good to notice that, but I don't hold anything that we did in childhood as something that we're responsible for. So I delineate that. When we're talking about non-victimization, I'm like, let's put our grown-up panties on now.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there's work to be done in the world. And there's things that we're here to create and contribute. And most of us are getting stopped by these, conversations that we created when we were too young to know any better. That somehow I'm damaged goods, or somehow I'm bad. So I'm always like, trying to be good and get approval because I'm bad. I'm stuck in that mode, and I'm not showing up as the powerhouse that I really am and causing what I'm here to create.
Yeah. Yeah. And then your next step is seeing yourself as source. Yeah. Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Well, we're talking about that. So seeing yourself as source are things like not engaging the conflict, or, showing up as defended and creating a lack of safety for someone else. It's what you're generating in the relationship and how you're showing up, and because beliefs are relational. So we're getting mirroring back, and again, this is why it's hard to overcome resignation, because we have so much evidence for the old story.
Yeah.
Right. Let me tell you a story about how this works. Okay. I'll tell you just from my own life, and which has to do with the What's True About You book. So, I have some really great credentials, but if you haven't, I'm not good enough. Even if you have all those credentials, New York Times bestselling author, sold 600,000 copies of Calling in the One, all those amazing accomplishments, right? But I'm still walking around vulnerable to the collapse that I created when I was a kid, that somehow I'm not good enough. So the What's True About You teaching is the core transformative technology that's underneath these other two books, Conscious Uncoupling and Calling in the One. And it's why they're so effective and so powerful, a transformative experience. And you can create anything with the What's True About You book. Any place you've been stuck, you can have a breakthrough. So, but the teachings are sophisticated. They're challenging the current status quo of some of the assumptions in the psychotherapeutic community. And, and so for me, inside the I'm, not really good enough, I'm anxious about bringing this forward because who am I? I'm not a PhD. I'm just a master level clinician or, the crazy ways we have of diminishing ourselves, right? But that's the conversation I am emotionally centered in, is I'm not good enough. So I'm trying to write this book proposal for this book. It took me, Richard, years to write this book proposal, at least 3-4 years. I'm struggling, can't really get it. I'm getting frustrated. I took a 2-week writing retreat to Kauai and went out into the woods and just sat there for 2 weeks. I mean, I was just really trying to do my best, but it wasn't coming out quite in the way that I needed it to. But I got impatient and I sent it off to my agent for my last book, Conscious Uncoupling, who is a friend of mine and who I love. And she read the proposal and she turned it down. She said, I'm not getting it, not feeling it, don't see the value in it. Sorry. So 4 years of work, finally give it to her and she rejects me, crushing validation of the I'm not good enough. See, I was right about that. Then I had this epiphany. I'm just sitting there one day and I have this epiphany and I go, oh, you can't write a book about waking up to and sourcing how you show up in the world from the truth of who you are and not old trauma from the old trauma. You have to write the book from the future.
Yeah.
Who are you when the book is a New York Times best-selling author already? Who are you when it's already birthed a new form of psychotherapy that adds to our, toolkit? Like, so then I had a shift and I did the dialogue with myself. I did that sponsoring. That's just an old story. It's not necessarily true about you. Don't need a PhD, obviously, because life has given you this teaching. You've had the privilege of, teaching this to people for 20 years now. And I teach live courses. I've actually had 60,000 plus people in my live courses that I've interacted with over the last 20 years. So I have a lot of clinical feedback from people.
Yeah.
How this is working for them. So I'm telling myself this truth, whether you think you're good enough or not, you seem to be the one who's chosen. So why don't we just set that aside and just say yes to what's wanting to come through you and just trust it. So by the time I had that dialogue with myself, I'm actually somatically centered in, yes, I can do this. I can really do this. I know this. I'm the one to do it. I'm ready for it. I'm equipped for it. I'm going back in. I'm going to work on that proposal and I'll find another agent, right? So I'm kind of unstoppable. The funny thing is, I think we get little signs and synchronicities along the way because then the next day, Calling in the One, which had never been in Amazon top 100 books, even though it's sold over 600,000 copies over the years, it's never been in the top 100. I just happened to look at the ranking. I don't know, some people might not know, but Amazon has this little ranking thing about where you are in the hierarchy of the millions of books that they have, like where your book is being sold. And the Calling in the One was number 63.
First time in the top 100.
First time in 20 years. I thought, okay, I'll take that as a sign, a little kiss from the universe that we're moving in the right direction now. So a couple of months later, so I'm working on it now. A few months later, I call my agent, who's my friend, because I did have a question. I wasn't anticipating asking her again because she already turned it down. But I did have a question about asking someone else. So as I called her, I'm just talking about the book and how I've redesigned it and stuff. She got completely enrolled in the project and she ended up taking the project on. She loved the project. She ended up becoming such an integral part of the naming of the book and shaping of the book that I can't even imagine the book without this agent. So she completely did a total turnaround and ended up taking the book because I had shifted who I was being.
Yeah.
And where I was sourcing the book from. And then I could talk about it with cohesion and power in a way she got it.
Yeah, the being wasn't aligned with your intended outcome.
Right.
Your
So
being wasn't aligned.
a lot of us, when we go into the future, what's the future? We go right to, what do I do? It's
Yeah.
not a question. First question is, who am I being?
Who am I being? Yeah. And
Mm.
that as a habit, I find personally is not one that comes intuitively, to
Right.
go to the who first.
Yes, it's
What's
not.
intuitive is to go to the what and to labor on the what and fill that out and illustrate it. Uh,
Ex- mm.
and that may engender like a sense of a different state of being as we dwell in the what, but to consciously focus on the who has such power, doesn't it? As your story just illustrates.
Foundation. It's
Yeah.
the field of ontology, who one is being. We know that phenomenon. Like, look, if you think about, you're at a party and you look up across the room and somebody walks into the room, you can kind of tell, does that person live in a friendly universe or an unfriendly universe?
Yeah.
Who are they being when they walk in? Are they defended? Are they guarded? Are they a little contracted? Are they distant? Or are they open, looking for friends, assuming, like it's just a state of who you're being. And it will
Yeah.
generate something. It generates something. It impacts people. It impacts the field around you, and it creates possibility or it contracts possibility. So this question, what am I assuming is true, is very connected to who am I being? Is it
Yeah.
true that I'm not good enough, or is it true that I'm worthy of the future I'm standing for?
Yeah. Because the truth I'm rooted in is tethering my being, my
Yeah.
state of being.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned earlier that the assumptions you're challenging. I keep going back to psychotherapy because I hear so many people having negative stories about psychotherapy, and I didn't. I had an analyst, a psychoanalyst, who I did just spin my wheels with. But I did like 3 sessions with it. And I was like, I'm bored of insights. I want to transform. I don't care that I understand my childhood better. I don't care that I now understand why I behave in certain ways. I just want to not behave like that anymore. Thank you very much. The understanding is giving me nothing, and I'm paying you a fortune for it. So I fired him, but then I found this really deep work that was profoundly impactful. So
Yes.
for people who maybe have that sense in the world right now, like I'm seeing this therapist, but like my life isn't getting better. You talked about the assumptions you're challenging. What are the core assumptions of psychotherapy that you're challenging?
Oh, well, I think psychotherapy is a little top heavy with victimization, really.
Okay.
Okay. And what I mean by that is that we're kind of at the effect of what happened to us in our childhood in a way that is um, deeply imprinted into the unconscious and, the somatic field. And so I think a lot of us are getting stuck in the birth canal because we feel so kind of captivated by our imprinting. We feel frustrated by it. And it feels nebulous. Like, where is the unconscious? Like, how do you address it? How do you get these splinters out of your soul? Where the work that I'm pointing to in this self as source piece is you literally see how you're generating relational evidence, how you just recreated it, which means you have a choice to do it differently. So when I talk about self as source, I'm not talking about, if I say to somebody, how are you the source of, your dysfunctional relationship with money? How are you the source of that? They're going to go into a story about how their dad was never very good with money, or how their mom used to pinch pennies, or how somebody stole money from them once. And, they go into their history. And so what they're basically telling me is I'm still at the effect of that story. I'm still at the effect of what happened. They're going to explain it psychologically, why they are the way they are, but there's no access to power there. So what
Mm,
I'm looking for when I say, how are you the source of it, or what are the choices you're making? And what are the actions you're taking or not taking right now as an adult? And that
yeah.
choice might be is I don't, I never learned how to balance my checkbook, or I don't ever even know how much money I have. I don't pay attention to money. or I run my credit cards up. I choose to put things on my credit card. It's just owning your choice, because once you can own your choices, then you look and you can question it. Is there a better way to do this? Is there a way that might be more effective and more aligned with the commitment that I have to create financial freedom for myself, where I'm not, always trying to get out from under? So I'm looking at choices and actions that
Yeah.
people can actually, and ultimately at the end of the day, where we're going is to make new choices.
Right. This is your point, but volitional over psychological. So the so one of the assumptions that you're challenging is that understanding of myself psychologically, as this relates to my victimhood in my past, is
Doesn't
not is not access to an improved life. Ultimately, it's not
Exactly.
providing us that.
Yeah, that's a big one. And the other is that if I just do the healing work, if I endlessly heal, at some point I just start having a great life. And I'm saying not necessarily, because you're missing development that would allow you to have a great life.
Mm,
You actually don't know. So when people come to me with calling in the one, they're like, well, if I've had all these really dysfunctional, toxic relationships, what can I do, other than the 49-day course that I created, the Calling in the One course? And I say, read books for couples on how to have a great relationship, like become a student of healthy love, because those are things you don't yet know. And when you know them, you can then do them and you can create that for yourself.
right. Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense. Yeah. Like healing. Yeah. Healing alone isn't going to get you the life you love necessarily, right? or even or perhaps even most likely is not going to get you there. Yeah. Is there another one? Are there any other assumptions?
Well, those are the two main ones that I'm really challenging and
Yeah.
inviting to really grow. And I do think that there's also an assumption that beliefs are kind of just about myself. I do want us to further develop and explore. Uh, Projective identification is actually a psychoanalytic term, but basically what that means is what we're assuming is true about the other person, and then how that impacts that person and kind of evokes that part of their personality, right? It brings out things in them. So we're influencing each other constantly, who we're being. And to become much more sophisticated in seeing our own projections, much more responsible for what the impact of those projections onto other people. But this goes back into how we're the source of our experience again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I shared this story on the podcast that when I got two sons, two boys, and one of them, he had his Lego model smashed up by his brother.
Oh,
And he was all ready for vengeance, right? He was going to go and smash up his brothers. And I project, I actively like, and I told him that, like, Arthur, I know how mature you are. I get how you're going to get through this. I can see how you're going to put this back together. I see your anger, and I know you can handle this. And so I was just like beaming, all this positive production. And he didn't seek vengeance. He didn't get smashed up. Yeah, he just got on. He built his model, and then and then it
what
passed.
what a
Um,
good daddy moment. That's amazing. That's beautiful modeling.
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah. So I think there's an awful lot to be said for this idea we create others through the way that we listen to them, to the beliefs we have about ourselves, to the beliefs we have about them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
By the way, I do. We talked about victimization, but you asked about grief also. And I do think that many of the things that we have been through and had to suffer through are worthy of our attention and our tears. And sometimes we just need to learn how to hold ourselves in these places,
yeah,
very tenderly, with a lot of love and a lot of compassion. I do love the framework of, Joseph Campbell, that we're all on a hero's journey. And I believe that life is going somewhere. and that out of great grief can come great gifts that we then have to give to others. And we have to kind of shepherd those gifts along. What wisdom do I now have to pass on to others? What will I take a stand for in the world? How does this shape my own values and what matters most and what's important to give my love and attention to? So grief can mold us and change us. Where we get stuck in grief is when we're making disempowered meaning of it, meaning we collapse into a source fracture story. See, I'm unlucky in love and I'll never be lucky in love. I was born into a loveless home and I'm probably never going to figure that out. It's the collapse, and we get stuck into grief, and we can spend our whole lives in that grief, truthfully. So we want to shepherd grief to the other side, which is always going to have to do with, well, what's the golden gifts that I now have to offer others because of what I've suffered through? How can I turn that into wisdom, goodness, and love?
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see how. Well, to me, it would be if I could intuit how if I didn't fully grieve something somehow,
Mm-hmm.
then I could get stuck in the story about it, and
Mm-hmm.
um, so grief has a place, but it's almost like you've got to be careful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we talk about making new choices, new actions. Is there anything more to say about choice?
The choice to show up differently will always require you do things you don't yet know how to do. This is where we get stopped too.
Right.
Okay. So, how do you have a non-toxic relationship? Well, you assert your boundary around certain things, right? So if you look at, a lot of us are like, oh, he's so toxic, she's so toxic, but we're not really. The truth is, it doesn't matter. What we're saying is that I get kind of toxic in relationship with that person,
Yeah.
right? I start giving my power away to that person. I
Right.
stop telling the truth. I start, you know, dimming down my light or whatever I'm doing to try and keep the peace. So that's my 3% there, right? So how would I stop having toxic relationships? Well, it means I'm going to need to start to tell the truth or be willing to disappoint other people, tolerate their anger, tolerate that they might actually leave if I set a boundary, so that I'm choosing fidelity to myself, fidelity to my future that I'm committed to over keeping the peace in that moment where I'm kowtowing to the weakest part of another person. I always like to speak up to people, not down to people, which sometimes
Mm,
is like. But if I'm kowtowing to their weakest parts, I'm basically giving up on them.
yeah.
So that's not a great way to go, and it costs me my power. So how do I be in integrity with myself in that relationship? So I'm leaning in and I'm listening for that part of it, and I'm growing myself in the direction of health. And would you remind me of your question again? I just
The
lost.
choice, but it makes complete sense, and what was it,
Oh, yeah, yeah. And
you
what I
just
don't know how to do is set a boundary. Well, what is the boundary? I don't even know what I'm feeling. You're just going to instantly get confronted with what you don't know. Well, I don't know what the boundary is that I would set, and I don't know how I would say that. And if you're unsophisticated about it, you're gonna end up setting a boundary like, well, I don't like that either, like an accusation, right? Like, or something like where there's something in there in the tone of voice or something.
yeah,
But
yeah,
that's
yeah.
say, look, uh, this is okay. This is in this in this incident of the toxic relationship. This is how you might model self responsibility. I hope you forgive me for saying this, but I
Mm,
don't know that I've told you the truth in this area about how I really feel because I've been afraid to upset you and I've been a bit of a coward about it. Please forgive me. But the truth is that I really don't like doing XYZ every Friday night. And
right,
I'd rather not do it anymore.
right.
You have to take
Yeah,
responsibility for yourself. And then it's non-threatening to the other person. And then, maybe they'll work it out with you and they'll rise, or they'll act out or do whatever they do. But I always say, when you are committed to creating a breakthrough in an area of life that's been difficult for you, you must have fidelity to that future. It will cost you. You will have to leave behind the self you've known, leave behind the habits you've known, the pseudo safety strategies you've known. You're going to have to venture off into the realm of risk and start to show up in ways that you don't quite have a mastery in yet. You're going to have to let yourself fall down, be a beginner, make mistakes, and just put one foot in front of the other until you get this.
Keep choosing to do the thing.
And suddenly you have a new life.
Yeah.
People are relating to you differently. And that's why, I don't have problems looking people in the eye anymore. You just kind of outgrow that version of yourself is what happens.
Yeah. Through the choice of looking that barista in the eye.
Exactly.
From the beingness of the person who's speaking to thousands.
That's funny. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the choice. I remember the first time I told my mother, like, she always had this thing. She'd walk into, like, when I was a kid, into my bedroom, and if I go home to visit her, she'd always just walk in, like, and it was with a cup of tea in the morning, right? And so I was like, but it really bugged me. She never knocked, and for years I just bit my lip. Thank you for the tea, Mum. And it was one of the most glorious moments in my life when I chose to say, "Hey, Mum, look, I love that you bring me the tea, but could I just ask you something? Would it be okay if you just knocked before you came in?" And I love my mother, and she didn't take it well, but that was like a total turning point in my life.
Isn't that amazing? Well, it is the small moments, that's what James Clear's writing about atomic habits,
Mm.
But to be able to identify specifically what those interventions are that are going to be key interventions to graduate you from who you've known yourself to be for the possibility of who you might become now is what we're really looking for, because we want velocity moving forward. It's time for all of us to rise into our best selves and to start to live the lives that we really came here to live and have the potential to be living. So that's the overall message. We have work to do to create a beautiful world for next generations.
We are creating a beautiful world now, Katherine.
We are. Thank you.
It's moments.
It's happening.
I declare this to be a beautiful moment.
Amen. I'm with you in that.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, is there anything we haven't talked about?
I don't think so. Maybe what I'm doing next weekend, but.
What are you doing next weekend, Katherine?
I think I have friends visiting. Isn't that lucky me? Lucky me.
All right. Well, it has been an absolute privilege to have taken a deep dive into What's True About You.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And go get the book. I should say the exercises are super simple. And it is one of these books where you're not just reading it. You're encouraged to participate. And all the exercises are super easy, really doable.
Also, if you just go to KatherineWoodwardThomas.com, when you buy the book, you just put in some information and I'll send you videos of me leading you through the exercises too. For those you led through.
Yeah. So I recommend taking it on. I love this new stance you're bringing to the world in this intersection between therapy and coaching. It feels like that's what the world needs right now, is this open dialogue about how we bring these worlds together. There's clearly enormous value in the human potential movement and the coaching and all of that. And there's, as we've established, great value in the psychotherapeutic mode. It's where's the balance? What's the world in which we draw from both and synthesize it and create something even better than both? As far as I'm concerned, you're on the forefront of that, so it's wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? We'll put a link to the book again. What's True About You? And your website. Katherine Woodward. No, tell us the URL. I'm not going to try and risk saying that and getting it wrong.
Katherine Woodward Thomas.com, and it's KATHERINE WOODWARDTHOMAS.com.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you.